My son locked all the teachers in the staff room. I'm the proudest mom ever. I got a call from the school around 10 a.m. just as I was finishing my coffee. The school secretary's voice was shaking. Mrs. Carter, you need to come right now. It's about your son, Aiden. When I pulled up at Jefferson Elementary, the sight made my chest tighten. 2 police cruisers were already out front. Kids were standing outside on the playground shivering in the cold, while parents gathered at the fence, whispering nervously. Inside the building, the principal rushed toward me, red-faced, sweating. Your son has committed a serious act of vandalism, he said. He's locked every single teacher inside the staff room. They can't get out. We've called the fire department to cut the chains. I blinked, stunned. What do you mean, locked? He pointed down the hall. Sure enough, the heavy staff room door was wrapped in a thick chain with a padlock, my padlock, from my garage. And there on a bench, arms crossed and dirt on his jeans, sat my 10-year-old Aiden. His eyes looked older than they should have. Aiden, I said, my voice shaking. What on earth were you thinking? The vice principal cut in, furious. He trapped 8 members of staff, Mrs. Carter. This is criminal behavior. He's facing expulsion. Maybe worse, but Aiden didn't even flinch. He just stared straight at me. His voice was calm. I saved them, Mom. I saved everyone. The hallway went silent. The principal threw his hands up. Saved them? He's trying to spin this to avoid punishment, but Aiden's jaw clenched. Nobody listened when I tried to tell you. Mr. Graham has a gun. Gasps rippled down the hall. Even the police shifted uneasily. The principal's face turned purple. That is an outrageous accusation. Mr. Graham has been here 25 years. He's practically family. Aiden shook his head. You haven't seen what I've seen. He keeps it in his desk. I found it last week when he made me stay after class to clean up. A black pistol, 2 magazines. I told Mrs. Larkin and she told me to stop making up stories. That's ridiculous, the vice principal began, but her voice wavered. And yesterday, Aiden went on, his voice steady. I saw him put it in his bag after school. I heard him talking to himself. He said these kids don't respect him, that they'll remember him when it's too late. Everyone froze. The words hit differently when you remembered Mr. Graham. He was older, near retirement, always complaining that kids today had no manners. He snapped more often now, slammed books down, yelled when students whispered. Last week he shouted so loud at a girl for tapping her pencil that she ran out crying. And now, Aiden pulled out his tablet from his backpack. His hands were steady. I recorded him. The video was grainy, but clear. Mr. Graham in an empty classroom zipping up his bag. The unmistakable shape of a gun went inside. His voice muttered, tomorrow they'll see. They'll all see. The principal staggered back like someone had punched him. The officers grabbed the tablet, their faces pale. One muttered a curse. This kid isn't lying. That's clear as day. My stomach turned cold, and then, from behind the locked staff room door came a sharp sound. A bang. Teachers inside screamed. One of the officers shouted into his radio, possible discharge! We've got shots fired inside the staff room! Move, move, move! Parents outside started screaming as more sirens wailed down the street. The sound of the gunshot tore through the hallway like a thunderclap. Every parent outside screamed. Kids bolted from the playground toward their mothers. Even the officers who had already drawn their weapons froze for half a beat, hands tightening on their pistols. From behind the locked staff room door came chaos. Teachers screamed. A chair scraped against the floor. Someone shouted, he's armed! He's armed! The sergeant barked into his radio. Shots fired inside Jefferson Elementary. Active shooter confirmed. Request immediate backup. EMS on standby. My stomach turned to ice. I grabbed Aiden's hand so tight I felt his knuckles grind. He didn't fight me. He just stared at the staff room door with this steady, hollow look in his eyes like he'd been waiting for everyone else to finally catch up. Within minutes, firefighters thundered down the hall with bolt cutters. The padlock clanked, metal biting metal, until it finally gave with a screech. They yanked the chains free and stepped back as the officers took position, weapons aimed. On my go, the sergeant ordered. 3, 2, 1, move. The door burst open. Teachers spilled out, sobbing, clinging to each other. But not all of them. A few stayed frozen against the far wall, too terrified to move. And there, at the center of the room, was Mr. Graham. His shirt was half untucked. His glasses sat crooked on his nose. His hand shook around the pistol, but the barrel still swept the room like he'd done this in his mind 100 times. The window to his left was shattered, jagged glass littering the floor. A bullet hole marked the plaster. He'd fired at the window, tried to escape, but the opening was too narrow, and he was too old, too broad to fit through. Drop the weapon! An officer shouted, voice echoing against the cinder block walls. Mr. Graham's chest heaved, his face twisted in something between rage and grief. You think I wanted this? He shouted back. You think I wanted any of this? The sergeant's tone sharpened. Put it down, Graham. Don't make this worse. But Graham's hands shook harder. His voice cracked. She left me. 40 years. 40 years, and she just walked away like none of it mattered. I gave this school everything. Every damn year of my life, and now? Now I'm nothing. They don't listen, they don't respect. They laugh behind my back. The teachers who hadn't fled pressed harder against the wall. One whispered, please, Harold. I recognized the name, Harold Graham. He'd taught here longer than most of the staff had been alive. Always the grumpy one muttering about kids these days. I'd never seen him like this, though. His face was red, his eyes wild. His grief filled the room like smoke. You'll get your wife back if you drop the gun, the sergeant tried, his voice softer now. No, Graham bellowed, his voice cracking like thunder. She's gone. Nothing brings her back. And you? He jabbed the pistol toward the teachers. You all act like I'm crazy. Like I'm worthless. But you'll remember me now. You'll damn well remember the officers didn't flinch. They knew every second counted. One of the younger cops edged forward, hands steady. Mr. Graham, listen to me. You don't want to hurt anybody. Look around. You've got a room full of people who've worked with you for decades. They're not your enemy. For a moment, Graham's hand wavered. His lip quivered. I just wanted her back, he whispered, almost too quiet to hear. That was when the officers moved. A flash of motion. One lunged, tackling him low. Another grabbed his wrist. The gun clattered across the tiles, skidding to a stop under a table. Teachers screamed. Someone fell. And then, silence, except for the rasp of Graham's breath as they cuffed him, face pressed to the floor. I sagged against the wall, shaking. Aiden was still staring, eyes unblinking, as if none of this surprised him. The sergeant barked, "Suspect in custody." Weapon secure. They hauled Graham to his feet, his face crumpled, tears streaking the deep lines on his cheeks. I didn't... His voice broke into sobs. The teachers shuffled out, pale and trembling. One clung to another like she couldn't stand on her own. The vice principal dabbed at her forehead with a tissue, muttering prayers under her breath. But already I could feel it, the shift in the air. The principal's face wasn't just pale now, it was calculating. He glanced at Aiden, then at the chains on the floor, then back at the officers. His mouth pressed into a thin, tight line. The hallway was a mess of noise and movement. Officers barked orders, ushering the teachers down toward the exit, their shoes squeaking on the linoleum. A few of the braver parents tried to push forward, desperate for answers, only to be blocked by deputies forming a line. I pulled Aiden close, both of us pressed against the wall, out of the way. My ears rang from the adrenaline. The image of that gun, shaking in Mr. Graham's hand, wouldn't leave my mind. The principal hurried over, sweat beading on his forehead, but his eyes never left the padlock on the floor or the broken chains. He crouched for a second, almost studying them, before rising again. His expression was tight, unreadable, as though 100 thoughts were racing behind his eyes and none of them had to do with relief. Parents need to be cleared out of the building, one officer said firmly. We've got to sweep the entire school before we declare it secure. The principal nodded quickly, but then his gaze flicked back to Aiden. It wasn't the look of someone grateful. It was sharp. Assessing. Come on, I whispered, tugging Aiden toward the door with the other parents. But the sergeant stepped in front of us. Ma'am, I'll need you and your son to stay for questioning, he said, his voice clipped but not unkind. I blinked at him. Questioning? He's 10 years old. He's terrified. Surely you can... It's routine, the sergeant interrupted. He was closest to the scene. We just need a statement. Won't take long. Aiden didn't say anything. His face stayed blank as if none of this surprised him. We were escorted into an empty classroom, the kind with faded posters curling at the corners and desks, stacked neatly in rows. Aiden sat at one of them, swinging his legs silently. I hovered by his side, my nerves raw. 2 detectives entered, one male, one female. They kept their tone gentle, but their questions pricked at me all the same. How did you know Mr. Graham had a gun before anyone else did? The woman asked. I heard him, Aiden said simply. The man leaned forward slightly. Heard him how? He was talking to himself, Aiden explained, his small voice steady. He kept saying the kids don't listen. That nobody respects him, that he'd show them. He said he had something that would make them pay attention this time. Then I saw the bulge in his jacket. The detectives exchanged a glance. I jumped in quickly. He's very observant. He notices things adults sometimes don't. They didn't argue, but they wrote notes. Too many notes. Finally, they let us leave. By the time we stepped outside, the schoolyard was chaos. Reporters had already gathered behind police tape. Microphones, cameras, shouted questions, kids crying into their mothers' shirts, helicopter blades thundered overhead, and in the middle of it all, I saw them leading Mr. Graham into the back of a squad car. His head was bowed, his glasses had slipped halfway down his nose. He looked like a broken man, not the monster parents would see on the evening news. But my focus snapped back when I caught sight of the principal again. He was speaking to an officer, gesturing toward the chains that still lay discarded near the doorway. His lips moved quickly, urgently. And then, he pointed at Aiden. My stomach turned. The officer he was speaking to frowned, then nodded, scribbling something in his notebook. My chest tightened. The principal's eyes flicked to me, then away, like he didn't want to be caught staring. A reporter shouted from behind the police tape. Was it a student who locked the staff inside? Did he trap them with the gunman? The words cut through me like ice water. I squeezed Aiden's hand. He looked up at me, confused but calm, like he didn't yet realize the storm building around him. Let's get you home, I whispered. But we didn't make it far. A tall man in a navy suit stepped forward, blocking us at the edge of the crowd. His badge glinted on his belt. Mrs. Carter? I'm Detective Morris. I'll need you to stay for a formal statement. Both of you. Again? I snapped, my voice sharp with nerves. He's a child. He's been through enough. Ma'am, I understand, Morris said, lowering his tone. But questions are already flying. The press is running with whatever they hear. We need the truth on record before this spins out of control. Behind him, the reporters shouted louder. Who locked the door? Wasn't that dangerous? Is it true a student is involved? What about the gun? Police started pushing them back, but microphones still swung above heads like vultures circling. Aiden tugged my sleeve. Mom, he whispered. They think I did something wrong. I knelt down to his height, brushing his hair back with shaking fingers. You didn't. You saved them, Aiden. Don't you forget that. But even as I said it, I caught the principal on the far side of the crowd, whispering to the vice principal. She was pale, trembling, her eyes darting toward us, and I saw it in her face. Hesitation. Doubt. Detective Morris guided us toward a police SUV, away from the noise. We'll take you down to the station. Safer there. Less chaos. Inside the vehicle, silence wrapped around us, but my mind screamed. This wasn't right. My son had stopped a man with a gun. He should have been protected, praised. Instead, I felt the tide already turning against him. At the station, they put us in a small interview room. The walls were beige, the air heavy with the smell of stale coffee. Aiden sat on the chair swinging his legs while I paced. Morris came in with another officer, this one carrying a folder. They set it down between us. The folder was too thick already. Mrs. Carter, Morris said, we need to go over the sequence. Your son chained the staff room door before the incident, correct? Yes, I admitted. He did. But only because he knew Mr. Graham had a weapon. He kept the teachers safe. The other officer leaned in. Safe? He trapped them in a room with an armed man. I stared at him speechless. Are you serious? If Aiden hadn't done it, Graham could have walked right into a hallway full of children. My son gave the police time to get here, but their expressions didn't change. Aiden's small voice broke the silence. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. That's all. The officer jotted something down. Morris sighed, rubbing his temple like he was already exhausted by the whole thing. And then the kicker. A young cop knocked on the door, poked his head in, and said, Chief wants you both to know. Channel 9's running with the angle that the boy endangered staff. Said he locked them in with the shooter. Parents are already calling. My blood ran cold. Aiden looked at me wide-eyed now for the first time. Mom, they're saying I'm bad. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. Over his shoulder, I saw the officers exchange another look, one I didn't like, a mix of unease and calculation. This wasn't going away. Detective Morris leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. Aiden, can you walk us through how you got the chain? Did you bring it from home? Aiden nodded, his feet brushing the floor. It was in the garage. I took it before school. The other officer raised his eyebrows. That's a pretty big decision for someone your age. What made you think of it? Aiden hesitated, then said quietly, I just knew nobody would listen if I told them again, so I had to stop him myself. Their pens scratched against paper. My throat went dry. Morris tried to soften his tone. That's a very brave choice, son. But it also sounds like you planned this. You're sure you didn't talk to anyone else first? No one helped you? No, Aiden said quickly. His eyes flicked toward me, worried I might be upset. I jumped in. He's 10 years old. He wasn't planning an escape heist, for God's sake. He saw danger and he reacted. Instinct. That's all. Morris nodded, but the look in his eyes unsettled me. It wasn't anger, just doubt. Like he was trying to fit Aiden into a box that didn't exist. After another 20 minutes of questions, where he got the padlock, why he thought chaining the door was the best choice, they finally let us go. When we walked out of the station, cameras were waiting. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, lights flashing in our faces. Mrs. Carter! Did your son trap teachers inside with a gunman? Is he going to be expelled? Was this a cry for attention? I shielded Aiden with my arm, pushing through the noise. He buried his face against me, but I could feel his small body trembling. By the time we made it home, the story was already everywhere. Neighbors stared from their porches. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts, missed calls, links to articles. The headlines were brutal. Boy, 10, chains staff inside with gunman. Hero or hazard? School locked down after student's dangerous stunt. I slammed the phone face down on the counter, bile rising in my throat. That evening, the knock came. A man in a gray suit, glasses perched low on his nose. He introduced himself as Daniel Ross, a lawyer. I heard about your son, he said, lowering his voice. And I know what's coming. The district will protect itself first, Mrs. Carter, not him. You'll need someone on your side. I wanted to slam the door, to tell him I didn't need some vulture feeding on our pain. But then Aiden peeked around the corner, his face pale, his eyes too old for 10. I swallowed my pride and let Ross inside. He laid it out in blunt words over my kitchen table. The school will argue that Aiden's actions endangered staff. They'll say chaining the door was reckless. The media will eat it alive. And if the school board turns against him, they'll push for removal. Expulsion, maybe even juvenile charges if they're desperate enough. I stared at him, stunned. He's a child. He saved them, Ross nodded. I believe that. But I've seen this before. Institutions don't like admitting fault. They'll find a scapegoat. And right now, your son looks like an easy one. Aiden was sitting quietly at the table, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. His voice broke the silence. Mom, am I in trouble? I pulled him into my lap, holding him tight. No, baby. You're not. You did the right thing. But in my gut, the fear twisted. Because I could already see the battle lines being drawn. Daniel Ross stayed at our table long after Aiden had gone upstairs. He had a notepad filled with messy handwriting, arrows and circles everywhere. The principal, Ross said, tapping his pen, is already moving to distance himself. I've spoken to a contact in the district office. He's framing this as a breakdown in discipline. In other words, your son acted out, teachers were put at risk, and he had no way of stopping it. My stomach twisted. That's a lie. He knew Graham was unstable. He saw it every day, Ross nodded slowly. I believe you. But it doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is what story gets told first. And right now, the press is eating out of the district's hand. Before I could answer, the sound of voices carried in from outside. Angry, sharp. I went to the window. 2 neighbors stood in my yard. One of them, Mrs. Kelly from down the street, was shaking her head at another mom. Her voice rose loud enough for me to hear through the glass. He could have killed someone's husband in there. What kind of 10-year-old thinks of something like that? It's not normal, Ross joined me at the window, his jaw tightening. And there it is. The court of public opinion. That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound made me jump. Every time Aiden stirred in his room, I crept in to check on him. At 3 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling headlines until the words blurred together. By morning, it was worse. Reporters camped outside our house, camera crews parked across the street, kids on bikes circled the driveway, pointing. When I finally opened the front door, one of the reporters rushed forward. Mrs. Carter, do you think your son is a danger to other children? I slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. Aiden was standing in the hallway, eyes wide. Don't listen to them, I said quickly. They're just making noise. But he wasn't fooled. Mom, the teachers looked scared of me. Even after Mr. Graham had the gun, they looked scared of me. I hugged him tight, wishing I could crush the words out of existence. 2 days later, the letter arrived. Thick envelope, school district seal. Inside, a notice. Emergency board meeting. Subject, disciplinary review. Aiden Carter. I felt my knees weaken. Ross came over within the hour, flipping through the letter. This is fast. Too fast. They're rushing to paint a picture before we can prepare. He looked up at me, serious. The principal will speak. Staff will testify. They'll push for Aiden's removal. They can't do that, I whispered. He's a child. He's the reason. Ross cut me off gently. Truth doesn't always win, Mrs. Carter. Strategy does. The meeting was set for Thursday evening. Parents were allowed to attend, and when the day came, the parking lot was packed, cars everywhere. News vans lined the street. Inside the boardroom, the air was suffocating. Teachers sat on one side, parents on the other. I could feel the tension before a single word was spoken. The principal rose first, his voice steady but rehearsed. While we recognize the courage involved, we must also recognize the grave danger created. Staff members were locked inside a confined space with an armed man. This action could have led to tragedy. Murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. I clutched Aiden's hand under the table. He sat stiff in his chair, staring straight ahead, jaw tight like he understood every word. Ross leaned in to whisper, "This is where we fight back." And then the vice principal stood. She looked pale, shaky. Her eyes flicked toward Aiden, then to the principal, then back again. She hesitated, lips pressed tight. And for the first time, I saw it. A crack in their story. For a moment, I thought she might speak against the principal right there. But then she cleared her throat and said only, "We were afraid. Afraid of being locked in, afraid of what Mr. Graham might do. It was chaos." Her voice cracked on the last word. She sank back into her chair. Ross leaned toward me, whispering, "She's holding back." "She knows more," I nodded. I'd seen it too. The way her eyes avoided the principal's, the way her hands trembled. The board chair tapped the microphone. "Thank you. Now, the district would like to call for disciplinary action. Given the circumstances, we believe Aiden Carter's decision endangered 7 staff members, and we recommend his removal from the school." Gasps echoed through the room. My heart pounded. Removal. They were really doing this. Ross stood, calm but commanding. "With respect, members of the board, my client is 10 years old. 10. He is not a soldier, not a criminal mastermind. He is a boy who saw an armed man losing control and acted faster than any adult in that building. He saved lives." The principal's lips curled. Or nearly ended them. The gun could have gone off at any moment in that locked room. Ross didn't flinch. And where was Mr. Graham at that moment? Inside, yes, but holding a gun he'd already fired. Do we all forget he fired a shot into the floor before police arrived? Do we forget that? The room stirred. Parents shifted, whispering. "And what of Mr. Graham now?" Ross pressed. "He sits in a cell. He is awaiting psychiatric evaluation because of a mental breakdown. Do you know why?" He leaned on the podium, his voice steady but sharp. "Because his wife of 40 years left him months ago. He was spiraling. Everyone knew it. Everyone." Ross's eyes cut to the principal. "Especially you." His cousin. The boardroom exploded in murmurs. I saw the principal's face flush red, his jaw tighten. Ross didn't stop. Instead of pulling him from the classroom, instead of offering him real help, you looked the other way. You told yourself retirement was close, that he'd get through it. But you put a man breaking apart in front of children. And when one boy, my client, saw what no one else had the courage to admit, you want to call him dangerous? No, ladies and gentlemen, that is cowardice. I gripped Aiden's hand so tight my fingers hurt. He sat still, his face pale, but his eyes locked on Ross like he finally believed someone was fighting for him. The board chair tried to regain order, banging her gavel. "Mr. Ross, this isn't a trial of the administration. We are here to discuss a child's behavior." Ross cut in, sharp. Then let's discuss it. He didn't bring a gun. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't snap. He chained a door. And because of that, 7 teachers are alive, not lying on the floor with bullets in them. That's the only behavior that matters. The tension in the room was a live wire. But then, the principal stood again. His voice was ice. And yet, Mr. Ross, your client planned it. He admitted taking the chain from home. He admitted preparing for this. Do you really expect us to believe a 10-year-old thought of this on his own? Or are we to believe his actions were normal? He let the word normal hang heavy in the air, twisting it like a knife. I felt Aiden stiffen beside me. His hand trembled in mine. Ross opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the vice principal suddenly stood again. Her face was pale, but her voice rang out clearer this time. He's a boy. A boy who saw what we all ignored. Mr. Graham wasn't well. We whispered about it in the teacher's lounge. We saw his temper getting worse, the way he talked about his wife leaving him. But nobody did anything. Not the staff, not the principal, not me. And if Aiden hadn't acted... Her eyes brimmed with tears. We might not be sitting here tonight. The room went silent. Even the reporters froze, their cameras poised but still. The principal's face was thunder. Ross leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at his lips. There's your truth, he murmured. But I knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. Because while the board looked shaken, while whispers of sympathy rippled toward Aiden, I saw the principal's eyes. Cold, calculating. And I knew he wasn't done yet. The board chair adjusted her glasses, eyes sweeping the room before she spoke. Thank you, Mrs. Harper, she said to the vice principal, her tone cool, clipped. Your perspective is noted. The vice principal gave a small nod and lowered herself back into her chair, hands folded tight in her lap. Her statement had cracked the atmosphere, but it wasn't an outburst. It was measured, almost reluctant. Still, it hung in the air like smoke. Ross leaned toward me, whispering, That was more than enough. She put Graham's state on the record. That's our wedge. The board chair cleared her throat. At this time, the district calls Principal Howard to expand on his statement. The principal stood, straightening his tie like a man preparing for a stage. His voice was calm, steady, almost soothing. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in education for 30 years. I know our children. I know how they think. And I know what risks they can take without understanding the consequences. I don't doubt that Aiden meant well, but meaning well is not the same as ensuring safety. The fact remains, he locked 7 adults in a room with a loaded weapon. He let the words sink in, his gaze sweeping across the board members, then toward the crowd of parents in the back. I ask you all to picture what might have happened if Mr. Graham had turned his anger on the teachers right then. We could be holding funerals instead of meetings. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Some parents nodded, others shook their heads. Ross stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. His tone was calm but sharp. And yet here we are, not holding funerals. Because one boy, not an adult, not an administrator, acted when no one else did. We've heard from staff that they saw Mr. Graham unraveling for weeks, that he was muttering, angry, isolated, that he'd lost his wife after 40 years of marriage and wasn't the same man. This wasn't a secret, this wasn't hidden. And yet, he was left in a classroom. Ross's voice rose slightly, just enough to cut through the air. So why was it a 10-year-old who stopped him? Why not the cousin who signed off on his employment every year? The principal's jaw tightened, but he didn't break. That's a gross mischaracterization. Mr. Graham was evaluated, as all staff are. And while his personal struggles were known, there was no official reason to remove him. Ross arched an eyebrow. No official reason, or no convenient reason. Retirement was close. Family ties made it awkward. So you looked away. And when his breakdown finally came, you found a child, my client, to carry the blame. The board chair banged her gavel once. Mr. Ross, control your remarks. This is not a trial. Ross didn't flinch. No, Madam Chair. But if this room condemns a child for protecting lives while excusing the negligence that put them in danger, then it ought to be. The tension snapped tight. Reporters' pens flew, cameras clicked. The principal spoke again, his voice soft now, almost pitying. No one wants to condemn a child. But we must ask ourselves, why did Aiden bring a chain and lock to school that day? This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. It was prepared. That speaks to something more troubling. At best, it was recklessness. At worst... He paused, choosing his words with surgical care. At worst, it raises questions about what else he's capable of. Gasps cut through the room. My stomach turned. Aiden's small hand tightened in mine. Ross slammed his palm on the table, sharp enough to make the microphones buzz. He is 10. He's capable of climbing trees, of forgetting his homework, of staying up past bedtime, not plotting murders, not playing games with lives. He saw what none of you would see, that a man was about to explode, and he did the one thing that kept Mr. Graham contained long enough for police to arrive. Without him, who knows how many children would have died in those hallways? The room stirred again, louder this time. Parents whispering fiercely, board members exchanging uneasy looks. But the principal didn't sit down. His eyes flicked toward the vice principal, cold, almost warning, then back to Ross. And for the first time, he smiled. just slightly. Ross noticed it too, his jaw set. He leaned close to me, muttering under his breath. He's holding something back. He's got a card we haven't seen yet. And in that moment, I realized Mr. Graham wasn't just the broken man in a cell. He was still a piece on the board, a piece the principal was waiting to use. The board chair cleared her throat, her gavel tapping once. We've heard enough for tonight. The board will deliberate briefly and return with a decision. The room buzzed as the members filed into a side chamber. Parents murmured. Reporters leaned in with whispered theories, cameras still rolling even though the real action had paused. I gripped Aiden's hand under the table. His knuckles were white. He whispered, "Mom, are they going to kick me out?" I swallowed hard. Not if they see the truth. But my voice shook and I hated that he heard it. Ross leaned closer, low enough only I could hear. They won't expel him tonight. Too public. Too many eyes. But they'll try to keep this alive. Mark my words. 15 minutes later, the board members returned. The chair adjusted her glasses. After reviewing testimony, the board will not expel Aiden Carter at this time. However, he is suspended indefinitely pending further review. Counseling is strongly recommended. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Relief, he wasn't expelled. But suspension meant he was still marked. Still under suspicion. Reporters bolted for the exits to phone in the decision. Parents whispered furiously, some glaring at me, others giving small nods of sympathy. The principal rose smoothly, his voice loud enough to carry. The safety of our staff and students remains our priority. We hope the community understands this decision reflects caution, not punishment. But when his eyes flicked toward us, I saw it again. That cold calculation. This wasn't over for him. Outside, cameras swarmed. Mrs. Carter, how do you feel about the board's ruling? Do you believe your son is a hero or a threat? Is the family planning legal action? Ross shielded us with his briefcase, pushing through the crush. No comment. Not tonight. When we finally reached the car, my legs felt like rubber. Aiden climbed in silently, staring out the window. On the drive home, the radio buzzed with breaking news. Harold Graham, the Jefferson Elementary teacher arrested in connection with yesterday's lockdown, is undergoing psychiatric evaluation. Sources say the school district is cooperating closely with law enforcement to ensure he receives treatment rather than a lengthy prison sentence. Ross clicked the radio off. There it is. They're painting him as sick, not dangerous. Which means all the danger has to land somewhere else. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. On your boy. I felt my stomach drop. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through articles until one headline stopped me cold. Board suspends student who locked staff inside with armed teacher. The article barely mentioned Graham's gun. Barely mentioned the recording Aiden had made. It quoted the principal at length about a concerning pattern of behavior and premeditation. And then, buried halfway down, a line that made my blood freeze. Sources inside the district suggest young Carter may have developed these ideas from influences at home. At home? I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe what I was reading. At home. They were dragging me into it now. The next morning, my porch was littered with newspapers. One headline read, "Family under scrutiny after school scare." Another, "Is Hero Boy's mom to blame?" By noon, reporters weren't just outside. They were knocking. One even shoved a microphone through the crack when I tried to grab the mail. "Mrs. Carter, are you the one who gave your son the idea? Did you teach him to chain that door?" I slammed it shut, my heart racing. Inside, Aiden sat curled on the couch, hugging his knees. "They hate me," he whispered. "No," I said firmly, kneeling in front of him. "They're scared. And when people are scared, they look for someone to blame. But it's not you." Ross came over later that day, his phone buzzing nonstop. "They're moving fast," he muttered, leaking to the press, shaping the story. "I told you, the principal won't stop. He has to protect himself, and Graham is his shield." I frowned. "Graham? He's locked up." Ross shook his head. "No, that's the thing. The psych evaluation? Word is he's not going to prison. They're pushing for treatment instead. Out in a year, maybe less." My blood ran cold. They'd let him back? After he brought a gun into a school? Ross's eyes were grim. "If the district frames it as a breakdown, yes. They'll say it was a one-time lapse." "And your son's chain stunt? That becomes the bigger problem." That night, I checked my email and froze. A message with no name, just a subject line, "You don't know the whole story." Inside was a single attachment. A photo. Mr. Graham, weeks before the incident, standing in the school parking lot, arguing with the principal. Graham's face was red, his hands waving, while the principal looked around nervously, as if checking who was watching. Below the photo? "Ask him what he knew." My hands shook as I showed Ross the email. He stared hard at the screen, then looked at me. They're not just covering Graham's breakdown. They're covering their own negligence. Somebody wants you to blow it open. I thought of the vice principal, her trembling hands, her cracked voice at the hearing. Maybe she wasn't the only one hiding something. The photo burned in my mind long after Ross left. I kept staring at it on the screen. Mr. Graham with his face twisted in anger, the principal glancing around like a guilty man. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words at the bottom of the email. Ask him what he knew. By morning, things were worse. Reporters hadn't just set up across the street. They were on my lawn, cameras pointing straight at my windows. I shut the blinds, but their voices still carried. Sources say the boy's actions mirror things his mother once taught in a safety workshop. Coincidence or not? I hadn't taught any workshop. It was a lie. Ross came by with coffee and a folder thick with papers. "We don't have time," he said, slapping it on my kitchen table. "They're trying to bury you in rumors before you even get a chance to fight back." "What's in there?" I asked. Notes from staff who saw Graham lose control before the incident. Shouting at kids, breaking a stapler in the lounge, crying during recess duty. It's not much, but it's a start. I turned the pages, each one making my stomach churn. Teachers had seen it. They'd known. "And no one did anything?" I whispered. Ross gave a grim smile. "Because if they admitted it, they'd have to explain why they left him in charge of a classroom." "And the principal?" He tapped the photo on my laptop. He had the most to lose. His cousin, his responsibility. He needed someone else to carry the blame. And now they're trying to put it on Aiden. I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked at my son. He was sitting at the table, drawing superheroes with a pencil that shook in his hand. His cape was too big, his mask crooked, but the hero on the page had chains in his hands. He looked up at me. "Mom? Am I going back to school?" My throat tightened. "We'll see, baby." "We'll see." That night, another knock at the door. I thought it was more reporters, but when I opened it, the vice principal stood there. She looked nothing like the polished woman from school. Her hair was messy, her eyes red. "Can I come in?" she asked. Ross hesitated, but I stepped aside. She wrung her hands, pacing the living room. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "The principal's twisting everything." He knew about Harold. He knew he was unstable. "Then say that," Ross urged. "Testify. Put it on record." Her voice broke. "If I do, I'll lose my job. Maybe my license. I've got kids." The room went still. Aiden peeked out from the hallway, watching her. She noticed him, her face softening. "He saved us," she whispered. If he hadn't locked that door, Graham would have walked right into the hall. I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't going to stop at scaring people. My heart pounded. "Then help us prove it." She bit her lip, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small voice recorder. She set it on the table, her hand shaking. "What's that?" Ross asked. Her eyes flicked to the door like she was afraid someone might burst in. "A recording." From the lounge. 2 weeks before the incident, Graham and the principal. They didn't know I'd left it running. I stared at it like it was a bomb. "Take it," she whispered. "But if anyone asks, it didn't come from me." Then she slipped out the door before we could stop her. Ross pressed the play button. Static A scrape. Then voices. Mr. Graham, raw and ragged. "I can't do this anymore, Tom. I'm not myself. I think about that gun in my truck more than I think about these kids." The principal's voice, low and tight. "Keep it together, Harold. Just one more semester. Retire clean and nobody needs to know." My hands flew to my mouth. Ross leaned back, eyes blazing. There it is. Proof the principal knew. Proof he covered it up. But even as he said it, my stomach knotted. Because if this came out, the district wouldn't just fight back. They'd scorch the earth. Ross leaned forward, lowering his voice like the walls themselves might be listening. "This changes everything," he said. "But we can't just wave it around. If we drop it at the wrong moment, they'll bury it. We need to hit them where they can't hide. Public, recorded, no time for damage control." I stared at the recorder. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my coffee. "They'll come after me," I whispered. Ross shook his head. "They already are. The difference now is, we have the truth." The next morning, I knew Ross was right. A van parked outside our house, not a news crew this time, district logo on the side. 2 men in suits came to the door with papers. Suspension hearing extended. Pending further investigation into home environment. They weren't just after Aiden. They were after me. I felt my chest tighten, but Ross took the papers and smiled cool as stone. "Perfect," he said once they left. "Now we've got a stage." Thursday night. The boardroom again, packed even tighter than before. Reporters lined the walls, cameras already rolling. Parents whispered sharp words behind us. Dangerous. Crazy. Hero. I held Aiden's hand so tightly he winced, but he didn't pull away. The board chair adjusted her glasses. "We are here to consider further disciplinary action against Aiden Carter. New concerns have been raised." Ross rose before she could finish. Concerns planted by a man who covered up a crisis for months. His voice was loud, steady, all eyes turned. The principal's jaw tightened. "Objection. This is not a trial of the administration," Ross smiled coldly. "Objection? This isn't a courtroom either. But if we're here to talk about responsibility, then let's really talk about it." He reached into his bag, pulled out the recorder, and pressed play. The room went still. Graham's broken voice filled the speakers. "I think about that gun in my truck more than I think about these kids." Gasps, chairs scraping, reporters leaning forward like wolves. Then the principal's voice, calm, damning. "Keep it together, Harold. Just one more semester. Retire clean and nobody needs to know." The room exploded, parents shouting, teachers whispering in horror. Reporters shot to their feet. The board chair banged her gavel. "Order! Order in this room!" but the damage was done. Ross leaned on the table. You want to call my client dangerous? He's 10. He saw what grown adults ignored. The real danger sat in your classrooms because the man in charge, he pointed straight at the principal, cared more about protecting his cousin's pension than protecting children. The principal's face went pale, then red. This is a stunt. That recording is taken out of context. There is no proof that that is my voice. But his voice cracked and everyone heard it. The vice principal stood in the back, her face pale but steady. It's not out of context. We all knew, and we stayed quiet. Aiden was the only one who acted. And just like that, the tide turned. The room buzzed like a hive that had just been struck. Parents were shouting over each other, some furious at the principal, others stunned, some turning on me again. He lied to us! Our kids were in danger every day. Don't you dare let that boy back in this school. The board chair slammed the gavel so hard it echoed. Quiet, we will have order in here. But it didn't matter. The reporters were already pushing forward, shoving mics in faces, snapping pictures. The truth had leaked out, and there was no stopping it. Ross leaned close to me and whispered, we just cracked it open. Now we need to hold it together. The principal, red-faced and sweating, rose from his chair. This is a witch hunt, he barked. A calculated smear campaign against me and this school. That recording is doctored. It's illegal evidence. Illegal? Ross shot back, his voice booming across the room. What's illegal is knowingly leaving a man with a gun obsession in charge of children. The crowd erupted again. I glanced at Aiden. His little hand was shaking in mine, his eyes darting around like a trapped bird. I knelt to him, whispering, It's okay, baby. We're almost through this. But my stomach twisted. I wasn't sure I believed it. Then, another voice rose from the back. A man in a brown jacket, older, with hollow eyes. It took me a second to realize, Mr. Graham. The crowd parted as he stepped forward, security scrambling too late to stop him. His hair was thinner, his face gaunt, but his voice still had a sharp edge. You think you can pin all of this on me? He said, looking straight at the board, then at the principal. You think I don't know what you're doing? The principal froze. Harold, you shouldn't be here. Graham's laugh was bitter, broken. You left me to rot. You knew I was drowning, and you told me to shut up and smile until I got my pension. Now they all want my head, and you're still pretending you didn't push me. People gasped. Cameras whirred like machine guns. The board chair shouted for order again, but no one listened. Graham pointed a shaky finger at the principal. I told you I wasn't safe. I told you about the gun, and you told me to bury it. That's on you, Tom, not just me. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. The story had just blown wider than I ever imagined. Ross seized the moment. There it is. Straight from the man himself. A system failure? A cover-up. And you were ready to ruin a 10-year-old boy to hide it. The principal opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The room was already turning on him, teachers muttering, parents shouting, reporters shoving closer, hungry for his fall. And in that chaos, Aiden pulled on my sleeve. His voice was small, almost lost in the noise. Mom, are they gonna hurt us? I bent down, holding his face in my hands. No, sweetheart. Not while I'm here. The boardroom was chaos now, voices clashing, chairs scraping, flashes going off like lightning. The board chair's gavel was useless against the storm, and in the middle of it, the principal cracked. His face blotchy red, sweat rolling down his temple, he slammed his hand on the table. Enough! You want a villain? Fine. I did what I had to do. Do you think the district cares about kids? They care about lawsuits, money, their spotless record. I covered for Harold because if I didn't, they would have buried me alive. You think I'm the only one guilty? Look at all of them. He was pointing at the board now, at his own bosses. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters nearly fell over each other trying to get the words on tape. The chair's face went white. Mr. Harlow, control yourself. But he wasn't listening. He rounded on me. His eyes, wild and desperate, locked on Aiden. And you. Your son made me the scapegoat. A child. Do you know what this will cost me? My career. My life. Security finally surged forward, pulling him back as his words echoed across the room. Cameras followed every second, flashing, recording. It was over for him, and he knew it. Ross stood, calm as ever, straightening his tie. Well, he said loud enough for the mics, I think that answers any questions about where the real danger came from. The board had no choice. The chair's hand shook as she cleared her throat. In light of this evidence, Aiden Carter's suspension is lifted. He is cleared of all wrongdoing. I grabbed my son, hugging him so hard he squeaked. You hear that? You're free. Tears blurred my vision, but it wasn't the end. Not yet, because Graham was still standing there. His eyes were glassy, his voice hollow. Free? None of us are free. You think this town forgives? You think kids forget the man who locked the door on them? He looked at Aiden then. Long, heavy. You saved them. But you'll carry it forever. Just like me. Before security could reach him, Graham turned and walked out. And for a moment, the whole room was frozen in silence. The story broke everywhere that night. The principal arrested for misconduct, obstruction, endangering children, the board facing a state investigation, Mr. Graham taken back into custody for violating his evaluation release, and us, we couldn't go home. Not really.